I'm Peter Takács. I'm happy to be here in my studio at Oberlin with my best new friend, Zsolt Bognár. The interview will be conducted in English, even though it could probably be in Hungarian as well.
Jó napot kívánok!
Jó napot kívánok! Every solo sonata that Beethoven wrote is in this book, in this volume.
You spent many years of your life on this Beethoven project. I don't think it's possible that someone would emerge from this not a changed man. How did Beethoven's sonatas change you?
That's a very good question. One of the results, I think, is the recording process itself, which I hadn't really done a lot of beforehand. This was my first major recording project.
Had you recorded commercially before that?
I did a couple of contemporary kinds of things, but basically, no. Mm-hmm. So it was a big step. So of course we recorded in a concert hall actually, so that was nice. You were not in a studio. And you sit down to play your first sonata and you're really scared. Because you say every note that I play, every pedaling, everything is recorded and it's forever, right? So at first I was like this. But I learned over time that you can always do it again. You can always redo things. And it was kind of liberating after a while to just let go, and my producer was very encouraging, which is really important. He's kind of your handler, because yes. There are moments when you get it gets pretty serious, you're stuck. Anyway, so he said, Peter, just let go, play, we can always do it again. And so one result was being able to actually be spontaneous in front of the microphones, which at first I was
That seems
not.
like a contradiction.
Exactly. But it really did help me in that sense. Another thing that I learned was to be very consistent with tempo, because you would take something again.
Right.
And so you learn a certain discipline of pulse. And that's been significant for me.
I would be feeling oppressed that there's such a legacy of great artists who have recorded the complete set. Do you think of that when you try to sit down and record a Beethoven sonata?
You always are aware of the giants behind you.
Right.
And don't forget, Beethoven was one of the giants behind everybody in the 19th century. They all were kind of like totally petrified of writing a symphony,
Right.
So how can I write a symphony after Beethoven? So, of course I, studied with Leon Fleischer, with Schnabel's students, so yes. I feel like that legacy was there. And I feel that I somehow was able to integrate that into my own approach. I admire the great Beethoven performers, Brendel, Barenboim, certainly Schnabel. There's Solomon, who is a wonderful Beethoven player, Gilels, beautiful. But I really think I was able to separate from that tradition and just say, how do I see these pieces? I think I was able to do that successfully, and some people have really liked what I did. I mean, one of my values was naturalness. I didn't want crazy tempos. I didn't want to take prestissimo crazy fast, like it's marked prestissimo.
Right.
It's played awfully fast, but I decided that sounds kind of hyper.
Right.
And, so it's just a matter of a kind of energy. That kind of Beethoven lyricism that developed over time more and more for me. I really consciously worked towards that, to achieve a melodic expressivity that was specifically Beethoven's.
Beethoven lived in such a different time from ours. How can we get to the heart of Beethoven?
I think the universal ideas are the same. When you think about justice, when you think about healing, about illness and healing, which was one of the major concerns of his, those really don't change that much. the feeling of suffering and then of redemption. Those are, and that's what great art is always all about. You know what I mean? It has something to do with the local context, and you should know that. You should know about Vienna in 1815, and what happened. But then so many of the ideas are completely universal. And and that's why they speak to us now, I mean, I get kind of choked up when I think about Fidelio in his dungeon, thinking about his beloved wife, never seeing her again, and all that kind of thing. Those are powerful, universal, and pretty much timeless ideas and feelings, and people really respond to that.
So you recorded pieces from beginning to end. What's the value of that?
There's a sense of continuity and a sense of things naturally leading into each other. From small units like phrases into complete sections like the exposition and development, recapitulation, and so on. And that sense of starting at A and ending at Z. But then, I think you should edit. I mean, no writer would ever write a novel from beginning to end without editing, right? There would be sketches, there would be attempts, there would be reworkings, and so on. So I think of this as my novel.
That's in fact how Beethoven wrote these pieces too. He would have sketches, he would work them, rework them, agonize over them. I think that's part of the spirit that pervades.
And you always see the wrong turns he took, the things that he, sometimes you look at it, it's totally trivial. Like, I think there's something about the violin concerto where the theme originally, instead of going upwards, was going downwards. And you look at it and say, how could he do that? Of course, it should go up, but I think it started. So there's a sketch of that, and I say, come on, that's silly. But he tried it, and said, no, that won't work. I mean, it has to ascend and so on.
It seems that maybe Beethoven treated scores as living, evolving things, but today we have this reverential value towards the score. What's your approach to this? I mean, I read descriptions of Beethoven playing his own music and completely disregarding what was said.
Well, he was a cantankerous devil, I mean, he could be very tough on people, like with Czerny. He once wrote him a note saying, my dear fellow, I really enjoyed hearing you play my piece, but sometimes composers would like to hear it as they wrote it. And so Czerny writes this commentary in his book about Beethoven interpretation, and he says, never ever change anything that Beethoven wrote, because he wanted it played exactly as he wrote it. But it's not really true, actually. For example, at the end of the Waldstein, there's a trill, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And in those days, it was revolutionary. How can you write a trill and then have a melody on top? It's not playable. So at the end of the Waldstein, there's a little note that he wrote saying, this trill can be done a number of ways. If it can't be done fast, it can be done... I'm sorry, that sounds terrible. It can be done as quarter note triplets, or if you can do it as sextuplets if you can.
Different speeds and values.
And do it as a trill if you can. So he basically wanted people to play his piece, and he didn't want people to not buy the music because they saw that stuff is unplayable. So he was flexible when he wanted to.
Is that the approach you take with your students?
I basically tell them to play in the score unless I tell them otherwise.
Okay.
No, I make them aware of that responsibility they have as performers, that they have to engage the score and they have to be responsible for their decisions. And decisions have to be made. For example, in Beethoven, one of the famous ones is about the register. His early pianos only went to F. So very often he would have to back off, play it to F, and then write something change the material because he didn't have extra notes. The famous one is, how does it go? And up here, because he...
Yes.
So in a modern day, we have those notes. Should we play those notes or not? I mean, what's printed is... Now,
but editorially, we know that probably the motive would have stayed the same.
A number of things. That the moment that he got extra notes, he used them immediately because he wanted as much as possible. Famous story in 101, I'll keep that for later. The other information is when it comes back in A flat, how's it go? It goes up, he's got the notes and plays the same thing.
Right.
So you say, well, he did that here, here he didn't do it. So
How did you play it on your recording?
I play the upper notes. I don't always do it. I mean, again, you have to make an intelligent decision and a responsible. I'll show you a place where you shouldn't change it.
Okay.
In the Tempest Sonata, when it goes, right? It's wonderful. It goes. Okay, so that's fine. Then when it comes back in D minor, it should go up to B flat, but it doesn't have
But
those
it doesn't
notes.
do that.
So what does he do? He writes. It's wonderful because he just, instead of going up because he didn't have the notes, he turns it into a very, very poignant change, you know. So that one I would never go. I wouldn't do that because that's powerful and he makes a limitation into a virtue. So there you have to make that decision. I wouldn't change it.
Should a pianist teach?
I think they should. I think everyone should teach, absolutely.
Not just out of the necessity of the
No, I think
stability of the income.
you learn huge amounts by teaching. You know, I mean, you have to diagnose problems. You have to think of solutions. You know, you have to think of ways of expressing things that would make sense to someone else. You have to become verbal, which is something that I feel I can do. I think you learn a lot. It shouldn't be a chore. It should be a challenge, and it's a learning experience for everybody. I mean, Fleischer teaches. You know, Schnabel taught. You know.
Was there anyone who helped you along the way, and how?
Absolutely. In fact, when I was in your birthplace, Urbana, I was at a bit of a crossroads because I had applied for a fellowship that they have that originates from there. I'm trying to remember what it was called. And I was kind of supposed to be next in line, you know, I was supposed to get it. So I was planning to go to Vienna and study with Badura Skoda and start learning Beethoven sonatas, whatever. Well, I didn't get it. Somebody else got it. Somebody from Oberlin, actually.
Oh.
So I hadn't made any contingency plans. So I was in Urbana trying to think what to do next, you know, sort of like looking out there. And it made me a little bit more resourceful. So I wrote to some people in Chicago who had helped me when I was at Northwestern. And I said, look, I'm at this place. I got alternate for this fellowship. I sent them the little notice that said I was alternate. I said, I'm trying to contact Leon Fleischer in Baltimore. Would you help me if you accepted me as a student? And so I didn't hear from them. These were some patrons of the arts, Chicago
Okay,
area.
so these were sponsors.
Yeah, they had given me a scholarship at Northwestern. So then I contacted Leon Fleischer. I actually called his number. Wasn't there, but I left a message. I said,
Directly.
yeah, I'm Peter Takács. I had gotten into Peabody the year before, but
Okay.
no scholarship. So that's why
And
I
for
went to
people who
Illinois.
don't know, he teaches there.
He's been at Peabody for many years, and
Yes.
he's one of the great, American pianists. So I was at home in Milwaukee, and I got a letter with a check in it from my Chicago people.
So they listened.
They listened and they helped me very generously. I'm grateful to this day. And as I'm reading this little note, they said, here, we hope that this will help with your future. The phone rings. It's Leon Fleischer saying, Peter, thanks for contacting me. I remember your audition, and I'd be happy to take you as a student. This was one of those moments in life, where one moment you're lost, the second moment you are, happy. And it was a turning point for sure. My first job was in North Carolina. It was a nice job. It was a good first job.
Which school?
East Carolina University.
Okay, I've heard of
I was plucked out of Peabody to teach.
Right.
I didn't know anything about anything. But I got the job, and I wouldn't consider it luck, but it was one of my colleagues called me and said, we have an opening. Would you like to apply? I said, not really. I'm going to be a concert pianist. I don't need to work. And he said, well, why don't you come on down and, you can audition. We'll have lunch, So anyway, I was offered the job and I took it, and I think it was probably a good decision. So I'm at ECU, getting a little nervous that I'm going to end my life at ECU. I mean, nothing wrong with the place, but
Right.
it was, so
Most pianists don't aspire to stay there.
I'm on my way to a summer festival, and I call home in Milwaukee again. This is my focal point there. And I said, what's new? My mail was being forwarded to Milwaukee. So I said, anything new? I said, well, you got a bill here from, the cleaners, and you got a letter from Oberlin. I said, a letter from, where did I get a letter from Oberlin? I said, could you open it? It's my mom. She opens it, says, they have an opening, they want you to apply. I said, how did that come about? And when is the deadline for application? So it was last week, because I was on the road, okay? So I called Oberlin. I said, look, I just found out about your letter. I've been on the road. Is there still a chance to be considered? I said, oh, sure, yeah, we can consider you. So I had been I was going to Tanglewood, by the way, and I was supposed to audition for Seiji Ozawa.
Wow.
The first week in Tanglewood. So I had been preparing for that. So I said, can you come up in 4 days? And I just happened to be prepared, okay? Now, if I hadn't done anything to the summer off, I couldn't come up, and somebody else. Mm-hmm. So I said, sure. So I flew out, I played my audition, they offered me the job, okay? How did they know about me? I had no idea. I was an obscure young little teacher at ECU. 20 years later, my former teacher from Urbana came to visit here, and which I love the guy, Howard Karp. He said, Peter, do you know who recommended you for Oberlin? I said, it's a mystery to me. I never knew. He said, well, they called me. And they said, we hear that you taught Peter Takács. Is he someone you would recommend? So he said, yeah, of course. Yeah, he's up and coming, young teacher, whatever. So, connections.
So,
I don't go out seeking these things. I'm fortunate and lucky and grateful that people support me, But, there's a nice saying, and I don't remember who said it, that said, luck favors the prepared mind. In other words, it's not just blind luck. You have to have certain qualities, you have to have certain abilities, and then at a certain moment, it gets connected with an opportunity.